Good morning, friends. We are almost at the end of our book. We are reading Officer Spence Makes No Sense. We are on chapter 11. There's only 2 more chapters left. I definitely think at this point you should know the difference between what the character wants, which is this box, and what the problem or conflict is in the story. I definitely think that the main characters, Officer Spence and Arlo included, want to know who stole the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But the problem or conflict, which is much bigger in the story, is the fact that Officer Spence has now arrested all the adults in the school. So that's a big problem / conflict. Conflict is really the word that we would use instead. So to say the conflict of the story is that all the adults are in single jail cells, but Arlo and Officer Spence really want to know who stole the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And if we could close either of those problems / wants, it would satisfy the other, right? I hope that your plot box, when you're filling those out, even if you don't do it with my story, you do it with your own, that it has multiple sentences in it. Remember, you can always use the back to add more. Don't forget to use your transition words like first and next and then and last. We're rounding up the end where it will be the last part. So if you're following along, we're on chapter number 11, Skippy and Jif Save the Day. And page number 80 if you're reading your own book with us, okay? Here we go. Officer Spence was about to name the peanut butter and jelly bandit when we heard this loud grounding noise. It sounded like it was coming from under the stage. And then there was a banging noise, bang, bang, bang. And then right next to Officer Spence, this thing popped up from under the stage. It was tan-colored, and it looked like a balloon or a beach ball or like something like that. A tan-colored beach ball is coming through the floor, I hollered. No, I think it's a giant sea serpent, yelled Ryan. It looks like a ginormous light bulb, shouted Michael. Run for your lives, screamed Neil the nude kid. But then we all realized that the thing that was coming up the floor wasn't a balloon or a beach ball or a giant sea serpent or an enormous light bulb. You'll never believe in 1,100 years what it was. It was Mr. Klutz's shiny, bald head. Our principal, Mr. Klutz, climbed out from the stage. He was wearing a prison uniform. Hooray for Mr. Klutz, all the teachers shouted. Coming up right behind Mr. Klutz was our vice principal, Mrs. Jaffe, and she was wearing a prison uniform too. She also had 2 dogs with her. We thought you were in jail, shouted Michael. Well, we were in jail, you betcha, Mrs. Jaffe said. We tunneled out using our yogurt spoons. I'm starved, said Mr. Klutz. Does anyone actually have any yogurt? Officer Spence looked really mad. He wheeled around and he pointed his finger at Mr. Klutz and Mrs. Jaffe like it was a gun. Freeze, dirtbags, he yelled. You're under arrest. Again! In fact, you're all under arrest. All of us? Asked Andrea. That's right, Officer Spence said. Kids, too. The whole school. Everybody's under arrest. You're all going to jail. Hands up. 400 kids put up our hands in the air. Mrs. Jaffe's dog started nosing around the stage like they were trying to smell something. What cute dog, said Andrea, who never misses a chance to brown-nose a grown-up. What are their names? Skippy and Jif, said Mrs. Jaffe. They're peanut butter sniffing dogs. Look at Andrea with the dogs. They're so funny looking, aren't they? Look at this long dog. So funny. Peanut butter sniffing dogs? I heard of dogs that sniff out bombs. I've heard of dogs that sniff out drugs. But I've never heard of a dog that sniffs out peanut butter. Maybe Mrs. Jaffe was just yanking our chain. Where do you get peanut butter sniffing dogs? Asked Emily. From a rent a peanut butter sniffing dog, said Mr. Klutz. You can rent anything, you know. Rough, barked Skippy. Get those dogs out of here, shouted Officer Spence. You can't have dogs here in school. The dogs were sniffing all around Officer Spence. Rough, barked Jiffy. You dogs are under arrest, Officer Spence yelled. Put your paws up. You have the right to remain. Sigh. But Officer Spence didn't even have the chance to finish his sentence because suddenly Skippy pulled something out of Officer Spence's pocket. It's a sandwich. A peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Gasp. Everybody gasped. Oh, snap, said Ryan. How did that get in my pocket? Asked Officer Spence. Who put that in there? I'll tell you who put it in there, Mr. Klutz said. You put it in there because you, Officer Spence, are the real peanut butter and jelly bandit. Gasp. Everybody gasped again. I didn't see that coming, Ryan said to me. You said it to yourself, Mr. Klutz told Officer Spence. The criminal is always the one you least suspect. The teachers started rattling their cages and shouting, and now everybody knew that Officer Spence was the peanut butter and jelly bandit, and we all started to boo him. Look. Boo! Throw the book at him, yelled Michael. Put him in the pen, yelled Ryan. Give him the chair, yelled Neil the nude kid. But Mr. Klutz held his hand up and made the peace sign. When a grown-up makes a peace sign at your school, it definitely means you have to shut up. Nobody really knows why, though. Why did you do it, Officer Spence? Mr. Klutz asked. Why did you turn to the life of crime? Officer Spence didn't even have the chance to finish his sentence because you'll never believe in 1,100,000 years who came into the all-purpose room at that moment. It was Dr. Brad, the school counselor. One more chapter tomorrow. I'll see you then.